这可
好了，三界之道，作业者难，百丈者八德，他年加岁，大业十年，即别三难，见着来别见，三界之不来水，三界之道，作业者难，百丈者八德，他年加岁。大业十年，即别三难，见着来别见，三界之不来水，三界之道，作业者难，百丈者八德，他年加岁。大业十年，即别三难，见着来别见，三界之不来水。皆所以来，可现所外，界外众生大业皆三百，当见大业强者见外，所现不是诸现灭多，日来并现念的见外，所见神对灭的不外。这个南大心来之不来水，心之南界三百，落叶皆来皆逃，其中的莫的百，取之过落过来所。做呢，我感觉吧，这个。多不多没国家的，毕竟今年这些那咱们面积啊，我咱也是那这个说了，这个嘛，这个说了，这些这个句嘛，这咱你说咱们学习的，看到就那问题的呢，这些那么这帮刚说的人对不对？这边也你们都知道这些，来给他录的这个中国的没给人当主要估计这个是。 탐지에게도 나게 죄된도 챔비스 쓰리게르고 예르시도 총하신 배송 이 시기도 딩담에도 두젠로야 라마로 자게 지제가나 결합 영어견제 원전 두젠라나 뭐 여대 먹으면서 저거 그 이런 보셔라 자 인도 좀 호일라마로 로르좀 주고 이제 저거 좀 주지 안 돼요. 로서 생겨요. 요즘 오고라서는 이제 까지 좀 라마니 소리 좀 주베게 앉아 줘라. 버지베 저러서 안돼. 디버지베를 저서 자기서 뭐도 오늘 저 칠레 좀 하다냐 봐. 이금 집에 저러서 안돼. 번데 도지 저를 그 조나마가마 봐. 이거를 인주는 시집에 이다는 좀 칠레 군이죠. 언제 주경을 좀 네, 주로서 지금 그 맨유던 라면 도저히 경험하는데 반대자야라 말은 뭐지? 다그 우리 뱀에 대해서라 그린 심여 관한 제선데 고선도 영어도 자도 나도 다들 방어야 취기 다听谈别给你们他们都家里的节上
Today is the last day of the first Ngok summer teachings. So I'd like to begin by wishing all the Tulkus, lamas, and teachers in the monasteries and nunneries, all the members of the Sangha, everyone at the various Dharma centers worldwide, and as everyone listening over the internet worldwide, and also the people within China itself and those in Tibet. I would like to wish all of my friends, both male and female, warm greetings.
다 가장 지단기 지 상계 냥에는 내 사회 제리야 아니 다 상계 최대 간데시제 더비 중요하다
Yesterday,
아니다
we spoke about how Buddhism spread in general after the Buddha passed away, and spoke a bit about the organization of the Sangha. So I spoke about those in general. So after the Buddha passed into nirvana, the teachings of the Buddha were spread very widely by the disciples of the by the students of the Buddha. In particular, I spoke about how the Buddha's students spread the Dharma throughout the northwest of India, and then it gradually spread throughout the entire region of India, as I explained yesterday, right? So at around the time when Ashoka ascended to the throne, the Sangha of the Buddhist Sangha had split into two factions. And so there was one of the faction called the Sthaviravada and the other called the Mahasangika. So it basically became two factions or two parties. So the Buddhism before Buddhism split into the two factions, before it became into two parts, Buddhologists or people researching Buddhism call that by the name original Buddhism. Now, after Buddhism had split into the factions, what they call it is the Nikaya Buddhism, or the Buddhism of the schools, Nikaya Buddhism. Now, later, modern scholars had many different names for these. There have been some debate about this, but generally, as I'm saying, it's accepted that before Buddhism split into the two factions, the teachings are called the original Buddhism. That is the name given to that period. And following the split into two factions, that Buddhism is called the Nikaya Buddhism. So these are the names they are given. So since it is split into two factions, there are then the two factions, the Sthaviravada and the Mahasangika. So these are called the two root schools. So whatever we say about these two, but the way they're described in general, the way we speak about in Tibetan Buddhism and the way it's described in the Theravada tradition are different. Generally, if we speak about it as generally over the world, we've got the Theravada explanation is accepted more widely. It's more influential right now. So for that reason, we say that the two basic schools are the Theravada and the Mahasangika is according to the Theravada tradition. And this is a little different than what we normally say in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. So the Sthaviravada and the Mahasangha are called the two root basic schools, or it's called the basic split. And even within these schools, there later became many sub-schools. Within the Sthaviravada, there became many secondary schools, and there are also many sub-schools within the Mahasangha. There are many schools. And so these are the secondary schools. So those schools that split from the basic schools, the two root schools, are called the secondary schools. Now, when we call them schools, they have different tenets or philosophical schools, you could say. So we talk about have slight differences in their fundamental tenets and different positions and different opinions. And so in this way, they're kind of like different philosophical schools. So from within the two basic schools, there are then split many sub-schools. So now how can we say definitely how many different secondary schools there were? Now, there are also some minor differences in the explanations given by scholars. But what's basically generally accepted is that it's split into 18 schools. So they're split into 18 secondary schools. But if we want to identify who the 18 schools are, what the 18 schools are, then there is not a single way of identifying the schools or saying what they were. And so in this regard also, the way it's described in the Theravada tradition, and the way it's described in the Tibetan tradition, and how it's described in the northern traditions are all somewhat different. So now, when was the time of this initial split into two factions? So what is the time when they divided or split into two factions? Originally, there was one, and then they split into two. So when was that? Now, if we estimate this is probably sometime at the time, probably in the time of the third or second century BC. But even there, that is under question. That's as I described the other day. When you want to speak about dates, there's not any agreement among the scholars of India. They all disagree. And the reason is that there's no tradition of recording history and writing, and so we have to make estimates, and so therefore each scholar uses their own intelligence and ideas, and they estimate in different ways, and so for that reason they cannot actually completely match. And we're speaking about what happened after the Nikaya Buddhism developed is that then later there was the Mahayana. The Mahayana tradition appeared. So when did the Mahayana Buddhism develop? There are the Buddhist scriptures translated into Chinese during the Han Dynasty. Now it's difficult for me to explain this in English. This is This is a very ancient Chinese dynasty, one of the very old one. And so there are old Buddhist scriptures translated during the Han Dynasty. And there are also the writings that Fa Xian and Xuanzang wrote during their travels to India. And by that time, Mahayana, from a very early time, the Mahayana had begun to spread in India. However, exactly when it began to spread and how it spread is still a topic that scholars are researching and discussing. And so I think I can speak about that next year, and I do not need to speak about that much today. But what is something that we can explain clearly is that by the 4th century, the Common Era, among all the different monasteries in India, like if it's like a quarter of those monasteries, like when we're talking about a quarter, what I mean is, so that means that basically for every 4 monasteries in India, one of them was a Mahayana monastery. So at that time, we can say that clearly that Mahayana had spread widely. Now, after the Mahayana Dharma spread, is that the secret mantra Dharma or the Vajrayana spread widely. Now, when we speak about in general, the mantra arose from within the Mahayana. And this is something that scholars do recognize. Now, after the mantra vehicle arose, then it spread from India into China. Some methods of Vajrayana practice spread into China, and then they spread from China into Japan. And so the tradition of Vajrayana in Japan was the traditions of Vajrayana practice that were practiced during the Tang Dynasty in China and were later brought to Japan. And so these traditions have been continued uninterrupted. Now, the other transmission of secret mantra went through Nepal and the northern regions, and then into Tibet. Actually, as you all know, in the ancient times, Nepal was like a part of India. If you said it probably wouldn't be inappropriate to say that it was the northern part of India. So in that case, now the secret mantra had spread widely. So in brief, if we think about the way that the Buddha developed in general, is that there's the teachings during the time of the Buddha and the Buddhism that appeared after the Buddha passed away. This is called the original Buddhism. Following that, when the Sangha split into 2 factions, into the Stavyaravada and the Mahasangha, from that time on, it is called the Nikaya Buddhism. So this is the period of Nikaya, or the Buddhism of the schools. And if we think about the schools, there are the main schools and there are the sub schools. So when we think about when they're just the 2 main schools, then there are the period of the main schools. Then later, when it broke into the 18, then that is the time of the 18 sub or secondary schools. Now, after the Nikaya Buddhism had spread, then gradually the Mahayana began to spread, and then in the end, what happened is that the teachings of the mantra spread. No, no, I thought that if I had to explain this today, because I've been saying the words original Buddhism all repeatedly, and you might think to yourself, well, what does he mean by saying original Buddhism? And so this is why I've given this introduction today. Now, yesterday when I was presenting the explaining the centuries, I was speaking about them in rough terms, but to speak about them in general terms. But when you think about the times, you think the time from the year one, Common Era, to the year 100, that's 100 years, right? So that is what we call in the first century. So the first century, you say the first century, the Common Era, you mean from the year one Common Era to the year 100 Common Era. Now, the second uh, when we talk about the second century, that's basically the period between 100 and 200 in the Common Era. But if we speak about it in detail, it is from the year 101 Common Era to the year 200 Common Era. Because in the first century, it goes from 1 to 100, right? And so after that, then you need to count from 101. And so when you count from 101 to 200, then that is, so basically every century has to have 100 years. This is something you need to understand. And so I thought that I would clarify what I said yesterday. Another thing what I'd like to mention now is we're talking about original Buddhism. People, sometimes object. They say that is the Buddha, were the teachings of the secret mantra taught by the Buddha or not? Was there a secret mantra before the secret mantra teaching spread widely? So these are interesting questions. So at this point, I'd like to speak about the original Buddhism, the Buddhism at the time of the Buddha and the time of around 100 years after the passing of the Buddha. I'd like to speak about whether during this period mantra had spread or not. Now, this is a very big question, actually, and I'll have an opportunity to speak about it next year. But since it's connected with the origin of mantra, I think there's no choice but to speak about it now. Now, these days, most scholars and most researchers say is that the original Buddhism was following prajna. And between prajna and means is primarily emphasizing prajna. Now, in our secret mantra, we speak a lot about means, the pacifying, enriching, and magnifying and destroying means, but those are primarily means. So in the original Buddhism, it emphasizes prajna. And likewise, it seems like they say that there is no connection between the Buddha's achievement of omniscient wisdom and the secret mantra. And the reason why they say this is that when the Buddha realized the nature, when he awoke to Buddhahood and realized the nature, he achieved Buddhahood by realizing the way things are. He fundamentally eliminated all the ignorance about the nature of things, and he developed the qualities of knowing everything, and that is what we mean by by awakening to Buddhism. And so he achieved this primarily through prajna. And they say that this has no relation to the teachings of mantra. So there are people who say this. And so the reason for this is that within the world and society, when you think about achieving the cities, the accomplishments of pacifying, enriching, magnifying, and destroying are somewhat related to superstition, actually. And so the state of Buddhism is just completely associated with prajna. It's not like the way other people think in ordinary society, and this is what happened. It's not what people are doing out of and making hopes out of just blind faith. So there are people who explain it in this way. But whatever other scholars say, within the Vinaya scriptures, now when I say the Vinaya scriptures, the four groups, the four sections of the Vinaya scriptures, and we can say these are scriptures of original Buddhism. They're found in the Theravada tradition. They're found in Chinese. And within these, when they describe how the Buddha achieved enlightenment, what it says is that he needed jnana, he needed wisdom. Now, so panya, or in Sanskrit prajna, he achieved prajna, then achieved vidya, or awareness, and achieved luminosity. So when the Buddha achieved enlightenment, when he found the nature of enlightenment, he achieved prajna. That is how he achieved enlightenment. So we talk about wisdom, prajna, awareness, luminosity. It's because he gained all these four that he achieved Buddhahood. So these are all primarily related to knowing the nature as it is and achieving wisdom. Because they're all like wisdom, prajna, awareness, luminosity. These are all like realizing or illuminating the nature as it is. We've got that word vidya. So in Pali, it's vidya. In Sanskrit, it's vidya. And this word vidya comes up. Now, the word vidya means that things to become clear. So we translated in English as awareness, right? So it has many different meanings, becoming very clear. And it can also mean knowable objects and so forth. It can apply to refer to many things. But it can also mean mantras. Within our mantra, we speak about secret mantra, awareness mantra, and dharani mantras. And so the awareness mantras are called by the term vidya. So according to the Vinaya scriptures, when the Buddha achieved enlightenment, he achieved the wisdom, the prajna, the awareness, and luminosity. And among these, the vidya in there, the awareness in there, is understood as achieving enlightenment. But it can also mean a mantra. But there's a sutra of the Theravada school, or a sutra that I mentioned the other day called the Brahma's Web. And what it says, as I said in the other day, now what it says in this is that later the mantra had spread very widely in society because of mantras, you can immediately show results. And so everyone was kind of enraptured by mantras, and they had a lot of superstitious faith in that. And so in this sutra, the Sutra Brahma's Web, it says that one cannot practice mantras associated with superstition or divination and so forth. However, in the Vinaya scriptures, it says that you may use mantras to protect yourself and also use true words. So the vidya that it's speaking about in the Sutra of Brahma's Web, these are the mantras that are not allowed. These are the awareness mantras that you are not allowed to use in that are connected with superstition. The members of the Sangha are not allowed to use these mantras. So what it says in some Theravada sutras is that we're not allowed to use the vidya mantras, but in other sutras it says that you may, or it says that you may use things that are called by similar names as the vidya mantras. And what this shows is that when you talk about that the Buddha prohibited some types of vidya mantras, but that he didn't prohibit all types of vidya mantras. And so what did he prohibit? Well, there are many different types of mantras that may not be used. We may not use them, we may not say these mantras, he said. For example, in the Vinaya, Oh, there's the Gang of Six, right? And they trained in the pointless mantras. And so the Buddha made the rule prohibiting the use of these pointless mantras, the mantras that are associated with worldly superstitions. However, there's no training or no precept in the 250 uh, trainings of a bhikshu prohibiting the use of these pointless mantras. However, it is included within the precepts of the bhikshunis. In any case, it is clear that within original Buddhism, that from one perspective, one aspect, the awareness mantras that were common in Indian society at that time were prohibited. This is very clear. However, but from another perspective, this word for mantra, vidya, is when the Buddha achieved awareness, he achieved vidya. This word does appear. When we look at the word original Buddhism, this word, they probably didn't explain very clearly what was meant by achieving awareness or achieving vidya. It's not explained clearly in the schools of original Buddhism. But whether or not it was explained uh, greatly or not, when you think about, we have vidya, which means awareness, and avidya, which means ignorance. So we have vidya, which means is awareness. So avidya means ignorance. And these two are opposites. If you're vidya or awareness, you're not ignorance. And if you're ignorance, you're the opposite of awareness. And so because they are the opposites of each other, so at that point, they accept that this is the so. So, so the realization of the nature is the awareness that is the opposite of ignorance, right? That is the basis. It is the awareness that is the opposite of ignorance. And so, for when it says in the Vinaya scriptures that the Buddha achieved wisdom, prajna, awareness, and luminosity, is something that can be explained. It is something that is related to mantra. Now, when you think about this word vidya in the original Buddhism, it's not frequent it's not frequently used in the scriptures of original Buddhism. But these few places where it's used are actually very crucial words. Also, we talk about the 10 names or the 10 epithets of the Buddha. One of them is saying the one with awareness and conduct. And so when we talk about the awareness, it is often said to refer to three types of clairvoyances. So the Theravada school, they say that the awareness in there does means the clairvoyance of the extinction of all defilements and so forth. And so basically what this means, if it is awareness or vidya, it doesn't necessarily need to mean the awareness mantras associated with superstition or blind faith. And it's also clear that the awareness mantras can also be used for good purposes, for beneficial verses. And it can also be understood as an aid to achieving the realization of the true nature. And this point or this understanding does occur within the teachings of of Buddhism. And so later in the Mahayana scriptures, it says it mentions awareness, and it says the mantra of great awareness, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequal, the mantra that completely pacifies all the suffering. And here, when we say the mantra of great awareness, what it says is the Mahavidya mantra. And so this vidya here is the same vidya as is mentioned in the original scriptures. Now, what is added to it here is the word mantra. So when you join these two words, you've got the mantra of great awareness. So at that point in the transcendent teaching of Prajnaparamita, it immediately talks about the mantra there. And so it says that this is an even more profound understanding of the word awareness that is even closer to the secret mantra of Vajrayana. This is another crucial point. And so what I'm speaking about now is when we're speaking about the vidya or awareness in original Buddhism, it has a connection to the teachings of secret mantra Buddhism as well. Now, within the scriptures of the Theravada, the Vinaya scriptures uh, of the Theravada school, it says that we can recite protection mantras. What protection mantras are called is parita. So these parita means mantras that we recite to protect ourselves, and it is accepted in the original Buddhism that we may recite uh, these these schools. So basically, we look at the mantras in the original scriptures, it says that some types are allowed to be recited and some are not. There are particular ones that are allowed to be recited. It's not unilaterally banning all mantras. For example, it says in the Pali scriptures and the Vinaya scriptures that you may recite dharana mantras in order to protect yourself. For example, when you are a bit stung by bees, or there's poison in the ford, or so forth. When there are venomous snakes, you may recite the mantras to protect yourself, to neutralize the poison, and so forth. And also, when you're using mantras to protect yourself from the sorcery cast by others, there is also no offense to doing that. Likewise, within the Vinaya, there's a discussion about 4 different types of nagas, and so in the Vinaya, there are these stories about teaching the stories of the Buddha teaching protective mantras for pacifying the poisons of 4 types of nagas. And now it also mentions that you need to recite these mantras with a compassionate mind and a loving mind towards the nagas. It also speaks about there are mantras to subdue snakes. Later in the Mahayana, there is the Dharani of the great Mayuri. And this is probably the development of the mantras previously taught to subdue poison in the original scriptures, and then developed into the great Mayuri mantra. Likewise, in the Theravada school, there's a very well-known sutra called the Sutra requested by King Milinda. So King Milinda was a great Greek king. And he was in a very early period. And he had a question and answer with a bhikshu, and within this there are quite a few different mantras. So even from that time, within Buddhism, there was a tradition of reciting various different mantras. So if we look at this, and we said within original Buddhism, you were not allowed to recite all sorts of worldly or societally based mantras to overcome enemies and so forth. However, in order to protect your body and to protect your life, there were special mantras that were allowed to be recited. And there was a tradition of reciting them, and we can say this clearly. Now, the third aspect are what we call the true words, or satyavachana. And we say satyavana, these are words that you say that are set out of the power of truth, and because of the power of the truth, they have special power. Now, because of the true truths, now there are many stories in the Buddhist scriptures about the benefit brought by reciting these true words. For example, in the Jata schools, there was a child who was bitten by a snake and was poisoned. And so they went to some sort of sage, someone who's practicing asceticism. They went to this person and asked him to do the help. And he spoke true words, and because of reciting the true words, the poison was neutralized. So there's this story. Likewise, also in one Theravada Sutra, There's a story of Angulimala, who first he was a murderer, and later he became the Buddha's student. And when he was going on going on alms, he met a woman who was having a pregnant woman who was unable to give birth, and he wanted to help. He didn't know what to do, so he went to the Buddha and he said, there's this woman who's unable to give birth, and she's having a very hard time. What can I do? And the Buddha said, now you go back to her and say true words. And so he went and he said the Buddha said the true words, and I said, I have done this and this, and if it is true, then may this may this child be born easily and comfortably. And because of reciting these true words, the woman was able to give birth healthily. Likewise, in the Mahayana, there's been a lot of discussion of true words. So the main point, to wrap it up, is that the main point is that in the scriptures of original Buddhism, it's not all mantras were prohibited. They used the word vidya. They didn't prohibit all vidya. They didn't prohibit all mantras. Many were prohibited, but they didn't prohibit all. In particular, it was particular to recite words in order to protect yourself, and it spoke about how the power of true words. When you think about mantras, actually, from one perspective, there actually are true words. Not only that, it's also permissible to say there's a connection, some sort of a connection between awareness mantras and enlightenment. We can see this because, as I explained before, within the Vinaya scriptures, it says that when the Buddha achieved enlightenment, he achieved wisdom, he achieved awareness, he achieved prajna, he achieved luminosity. And so definitely there is a connection between the Buddha awakening to Buddhahood and the Vidya. So there's definitely a connection there. So that is what I'd like to speak about. I will speak about this in more detail next year, but the main point there may not have been such recitations of mantra or yidam deities and all these rituals and so forth, this complete presentation of mantra and so forth, that'd be difficult. These only occurred later after Tantra had spread very widely. They only really developed at that point. But however, just merely reciting mantras and curing illnesses and so forth through mantras and so forth, and benefiting other sentient beings through mantras and so forth, there were these uses of mantra, you could say. You could say there are these rituals of mantra within original Buddhism, and I think that it would not be unreasonable to say so. So we will now take our intermission here, and then when we reconvene, I will continue and say the remainder of the teaching.